There's something sacred about the quiet moments before sleep, a time when the noise of the world fades and our minds open to stories that carry us gently into dreams. Tonight, allow me to take you on a journey, not across the map of the modern world, but deep into the folds of time, into the realm of myth and legend, where gods and mortals shared the earth, and wisdom itself walked among men. This is the story of Athena, the revered goddess of wisdom, strategy, and civilization. She was no ordinary deity in the Greek pantheon. Born in a flash of lightning, fully grown and armored, Athena emerged not from the womb, but from the mind of Zeus himself. Her tale is unlike any other. She stood at the crossroads of war and peace, intellect and strength, embodying the perfect harmony between reason and might. But Athena's story is not just one of divine birth and battle. It is a story laced with mystery, beauty, and quiet sorrow. From the great olive tree she gifted to Athens, to the cunning she lent to heroes like Odysseus. She watched cities rise and fall, yet she remained untouched by time, always observing, always guiding. As your eyes begin to grow heavy, you'll drift with me into the hushed temples of ancient Greece, where torches flicker on marble walls, and the whisper of her name echoes between stone columns. You'll hear the winds rustling through the olive groves of the Acropolis, feel the trembling earth as myths take shape, and sense the pulse of a world long vanished, yet strangely familiar. Tonight, this is not just mythology. It's a meditation on wisdom itself, and on the feminine force that shaped the conscience of Western civilization. So before we begin, tell me, from where in the world are you listening tonight? Is it morning or night where you are? Are you nestled in bed, the moonlight casting silver shadows across your room? Or are you somewhere far away, seeking rest after a long day? I invite you to share in the comments. I read each one, and I love knowing where these stories are carried. Whether to a quiet apartment in New York, a candlelit bedroom in Paris, or a starlit village in India, it brings us closer, you and I, bound together by history and dreams. Hello, my name is Sherry, and welcome to my channel. So let's begin. Long before Athena cast her calm, wise gaze across the hills of Attica, before the marble columns of the Parthenon rose against the blue sky, there was a different world, a darker, more primal one, a world not ruled by reason, but by raw force. And to understand Athena, the goddess of wisdom and order, we must first step into that chaotic dawn. The universe had not always been as it is now. In the beginning, there was only chaos, not disorder as we understand it today, but a yawning emptiness. From this silence came Gaia, the earth, and Uranus, the sky, who embraced her each night in a union that would birth the first generation of titans. These were not yet gods, but vast elemental beings, powerful and eternal. Among them stood Cronus, the titan of time, who overthrew his father Uranus in a violent act that shaped the course of fate. Yet even Cronus could not escape the cycle. A prophecy foretold that he, too, would be overthrown by his own child. And so, in a desperate attempt to change destiny, Cronus devoured each of his offspring the moment they were born. But fate, as always, finds a way. When his wife Rhea gave birth to Zeus, she hid him away in a cave on the island of Crete, cradled by nymphs and fed with the milk of the divine goat Amalthea. Zeus grew strong and clever, and in time he fulfilled the prophecy. He forced Cronus to vomit up his siblings, and together they waged a long and terrible war, the Titanomachy, against the old order. Thunder cracked, mountains split, the sky wept fire. For 10 years, the heavens trembled as gods clashed with titans. When the war ended, the world was changed. Zeus, now ruler of Olympus, divided the cosmos among his brothers. Poseidon was given the sea, Hades the underworld, and Zeus took the sky and dominion over all. The Titans were cast into the pit of Tartarus, a prison of endless night. Order had been established, at least, on the surface, but the gods were not yet complete. The new pantheon was still growing, still evolving. And in this early age of Olympus, the divine world was unpredictable, unbalanced. The gods embodied passions, storms of love, lust, war, jealousy. But there was not yet a force that represented thought. There was no deity to guide humanity toward reason, invention, or civilization. This was a world of impulse, of passions unchecked. And that, dear listener, is when Medes entered the tale. Medes was no ordinary Titaness. She was the first wife of Zeus, not a goddess of storm or flame, but of deep wisdom. Her name itself means cunning thought, the kind of intelligence that sees through illusions and manipulates the threads of destiny. She was not strong in the traditional sense, but her mind was unmatched. Even Zeus, mighty as he was, admired her counsel and feared it, because it was Medes, not Zeus, who had crafted the plan to trick Cronus into releasing his swallowed children. It was Medes who had whispered strategies in his ear during the war against the Titans. And it was Medes who now carried a child destined, it was said, to surpass the father. Zeus, ruler of Olympus, the king of thunder, grew afraid. For the first time, he faced a force he could not overpower with lightning, the shadow of his own downfall. Here is where the tale turns, gently, chillingly, in a moment of panic or fate. Perhaps both, Zeus swallowed Medes whole, hoping to prevent the birth of this powerful offspring. He believed he had ended the threat. But what he did not realize was this: Medes was pregnant with a daughter, and that daughter continued to grow, not in a womb, but in his mind. It is one of the great metaphors of ancient myth that wisdom cannot be destroyed, only hidden, and sometimes, the more we try to suppress it, the more powerfully it returns. Within the mind of Zeus, the unborn goddess stirred. Her essence mingled with his. She absorbed his strength, his thunder, his sovereignty. But she did not become like him. Instead, something new was forming. A divine consciousness shaped by intellect, not ego. A child born not from passion, but from thought. And far above, in the stillness of Olympus, the other gods began to sense a pressure building, as if a storm was coiled tight within the sky. Zeus began to suffer from agonizing headaches, ones that split his mind like cleaving stone. The other gods, bewildered, watched as their king paced the halls of Olympus, thunder flashing in his eyes, clutching his head as though the cosmos itself were being torn open within him. And so the world waited. A storm was coming, but it was not a storm of wind or rain. It was the birth of something eternal. The silence before her arrival was unlike anything before it, not the stillness of peace, but the sharp anticipation of transformation. It was the quiet moment before a sword is drawn, or a thought is spoken that changes everything. Wisdom, clothed in armor, was about to enter the world, and from this silence, a new age would dawn in the next chapter. We will witness the unforgettable moment of Athena's birth, a scene etched in divine thunder and timeless symbolism. It is unlike any other tale in mythology, and it forever changed the nature of the gods. Not all kings are toppled by sword or flame. Some are undone by whispers, soft as silk, winding through the corridors of time, and none echo louder in the halls of Olympus than the whisper of prophecy. After Zeus had overthrown his father Cronus and sealed the Titans in Tartarus, he stood triumphant, Lord of the skies, ruler of gods and men. He had everything: power, thunder, immortality. And yet, for all his might, Zeus was haunted by the same shadow that had plagued his father, the fear of being overthrown. You see, prophecy in the ancient world was not a prediction. It was a promise, a thread spun by the fates, not to be unraveled even by the gods. And it was a prophecy delivered in a voice ancient and cold as mountain stone that would stir the greatest fear Zeus had ever known. It was said that the child of Medes, the Titaness of wisdom, would surpass her father in power. This Zeus could not ignore. Let us pause here and truly understand the weight of that moment. Zeus had only just secured the cosmic order. The gods were young, the world was unsteady, and mortals had only begun to understand fire and speech. He could not afford a rival, not from beyond Olympus, and certainly not from within his own blood. But who was Medes? Her name may not ring out through history like Hera or Aphrodite, but Medes was revered for her intellect. She was cunning incarnate, cleverer than Prometheus, wiser than Apollo. Her knowledge went beyond strategies and riddles. She understood the deep workings of the universe, the invisible patterns beneath creation itself. She was the architect behind Zeus's victory in the Titanomachy. And now she was pregnant with his child. Some say Zeus loved her deeply. Others say he only sought her counsel in war. But whatever the truth, what followed was not an act of love, but of terror. Zeus feared that this child would be his undoing. He summoned Medes one last time. Some say he tricked her, asked her advice, as he always had. Others whisper that she knew what was coming and did not resist. In either telling, the moment is chilling. Zeus opened his mouth and swallowed her whole, not just her body, but her essence, her thoughts, her wisdom. It was a desperate attempt to prevent the prophecy, a terrible act of self-preservation, the king of gods consuming the very being who had once guided him, believing that by absorbing her, he could absorb her power and silence the child within. But wisdom is not so easily destroyed. Within him, Medes lived on. She did not die, she became part of him. Her thoughts moved like currents beneath his own, quiet and unseen. And in that divine mind, something began to stir. The child of Medes had not been erased. She was growing not in a womb, but in the realm of thought itself. Imagine it, the mind of Zeus, filled with storm and command, now carrying a second consciousness. A daughter born not of flesh, but of intellect. She absorbed the thunder of Olympus, the judgment of kings, the insight of Medes, and she fashioned them into her own identity. Days passed, then weeks, then perhaps eons, for in the timeless ether of gods, what is a century but a breath? And slowly, the storm inside Zeus began to build. He could not sleep. His thoughts became scattered. He raged without cause, wept without reason. His temples throbbed with a pain not even Apollo's healing could soothe. The other gods grew uneasy. Hera, his queen, watched in silence. Hermes whispered theories. The skies grew volatile, and the birds of omen flew in spirals. Never a good sign. Then came the day when Zeus cried out, a roar so mighty it shook Olympus to its marble foundations. A scream of agony, not of body, but of mind. A splitting from within. The gods came running. Poseidon stood still as stone. Ares reached for his sword. Aphrodite turned her face. And then stepped forward Hephaestus, the lame god of the forge, the master of fire and invention. Silent and solemn, he raised his great bronze axe, and with divine strength brought it down upon the skull of Zeus, not in violence, but in release. There was no blood, no scream, only light. A blinding column of radiance burst forth from the split crown of the King of Gods, and from that celestial wound emerged Athena, fully grown, clad in armor, shield in one hand and spear in the other. It was unlike anything Olympus had ever seen. There she stood, tall, composed, radiant with purpose. Her eyes gleamed not with wrath, but with deep, ancient clarity. Her armor shone, but her bearing was calm. She did not cry, she did not waver. She was born whole, born wise. The gods fell into silence. For a moment, even the winds of the high mount ceased. And Zeus looked upon his daughter, and did not tremble, for he saw not a rival, but a reflection. She was his intellect, his conscience, the balance to his fire. She would not overthrow him, she would guide him. Not just him, but all of Olympus, and in time, all of mortal kind. The prophecy had been fulfilled, just not in the way Zeus feared. Athena had indeed surpassed him, not in might, but in meaning. She had become something entirely new, a deity not of passion or chaos, but of balance, of clarity, of wisdom. And from that day forward, Olympus changed. Athena would never marry, never bear children. She would remain a virgin goddess, not of love, but of thought. She would walk the boundary between war and peace, between gods and mortals, always calm, always watching. And Zeus, for all his fear, had birthed not his destroyer, but the mind of the divine. In the next section, we will follow Athena's first steps through Olympus, how she carved out her place among the gods, and why her armor rang not with wrath, but with thought. There are births that echo through memory, the cry of a newborn, the sigh of a mother, the stillness after pain. But there has never been a birth like that of Athena. Not born in darkness, nor from the warmth of a womb, but torn forth from a god's mind. She arrived not as an infant, but as a woman in full glory, clothed in brilliance, armed for eternity, a daughter shaped not by nurture, but by necessity, a mind sharpened by thunder. When Hephaestus struck Zeus's skull with his celestial axe, it was not just the pain that was released. It was a long-building idea, pressing at the edges of Olympus like a storm cloud thick with light. And from it came Athena, not emerging as if torn, but ascending, a calm force, radiant and ancient. The gods stood breathless. Her armor clanged softly as she stepped forward, not in hostility, but in command. Her shield bore no emblem yet. Her spear pointed not in anger, but in readiness. Her eyes, oh, her eyes, gray like stormlit skies over the Aegean, deep with knowledge unspoken. She did not scream. She did not stumble. Her birth was an arrival, not a beginning. She looked upon her father first, and Zeus, king of all, did not see a threat. What he saw was something strange and powerful, the child of his deepest thoughts, his buried fears, and his quiet hope. In her, he recognized the part of himself that pondered consequences, that weighed justice before judgment, that dreamed of order beyond power. The gods watched in silence. It was Hera who broke it first, not with anger, but with wonder. For even the queen of Olympus, ever fierce, could not deny the purity of Athena's presence. There was no vanity in her, no seduction, no schemes. She had none of Aphrodite's shimmer, nor Artemis's wildness, nor the shadow of vengeance like Nemesis. Athena stood apart, and soon it became clear that she would not fade into the background of Olympus like many others. She would not giggle in the gardens of the gods. She would not sing or dance or love. She would think, she would act, and she would shape the world. Now imagine for a moment her first walk through Olympus. The marble halls, carved from the bones of the world, echoed with each step she took. The great eagle of Zeus soared high above, circling, unsure whether to announce her or fear her. The muses paused in their verses. Even Ares, god of war, narrowed his eyes. He sensed the difference, that she was not his kin in bloodlust, but something sharper, strategic, measured, unflinching. She passed through the gardens where ambrosia hung from silver trees, her fingers brushing no leaf. She bowed to no one, and yet no one felt insulted, for her presence demanded respect without arrogance. She carried it like a cloak woven from silence. In those early days, she was given no temple, no throne, but she was given tasks, not by command, but by need. When disputes rose among the gods, it was Athena they turned to. When mortals cried out for justice, it was her name that echoed in their prayers. And when war loomed, and the smoke of conflict gathered like dusk upon the horizon, it was she who brought not the sword, but the plan. She was war's mind, not its fury. You see, Ares, her half-brother, was the embodiment of violent impulse. He charged into battle with bloodied hands, drunk on chaos. But Athena stood beside generals and whispered strategies. She guided chariots and fortified cities. Her war was not for glory, but for defense, for justice, for balance. She was the calm between two blades, and she made her own weapons. In the forges of Hephaestus, she worked her hands unafraid of flame. She shaped her own armor, her own helm. And over time, her most famous possession took form, the aegis, a divine shield, said to bear the head of the Gorgon Medusa. But that tale we shall tell another night. It is said that wherever she walked, civilization followed. She taught mankind how to till the earth, how to build, how to reason. She inspired craftspeople, guided inventors. She was not a muse, but a silent instructor, never asking for praise. Even her anger, rare as it was, bore the mark of cold judgment rather than wrath. But perhaps her most sacred quality was this: she never lied, not once. In a world where gods were prone to deception, to trickery and mischief, Athena held to a truth unshaken. Her words were precise, her silence even more so. This earned her more than worship. It earned trust, a thing rare among immortals. And still, she remained alone. Unlike Aphrodite, pursued by countless suitors, or Artemis, running wild through forests with her maidens, Athena stood solitary. She made a vow of chastity, not for purity's sake, but because her path left no room for distraction. Hers was a marriage to purpose, to clarity. And so she built no family. She bore no child. She needed no lover. She was sufficient unto herself. Yet she was not cold. She could love not romantically, but through loyalty, through protection. She would grow to cherish mortals who honored wisdom. She would guide heroes, weep at injustice, and lend her shield to those who walked in truth. She was not the goddess of emotion, but she was not empty of it. She simply chose reason first. It is a lonely road to be wisdom in a world of hunger and pride. But Athena walked it with grace, the kind of quiet strength that changes everything not through force, but through influence. And so, the halls of Olympus adjusted. Her place was never questioned. She did not demand it. She simply made herself necessary. In the next section, we will descend with her to the mortal world, to a place where gods once walked among men, and witness the moment she forever changed the fate of a city, leaving behind not destruction, but an olive tree. There is a kind of armor that does not gleam in the sun, does not ring when struck, does not weigh down the shoulders. It does not protect the body, it guards the mind. And no one wore that armor better than Athena. By the time the mortals of the Greek world began to speak her name in prayer, Athena had already shaped Olympus. She had already silenced disputes among the gods with a gaze alone, weighed complex questions with the clarity of a measured mind, and walked the halls of divinity with a presence that neither demanded nor begged for reverence. She was not like the others. The Olympians were vibrant, yes, immortal, beautiful, powerful, but many were ruled by whims. Hera burned with jealousy. Poseidon raged. Ares thirsted for war. Aphrodite spun love into chaos. But Athena, she reflected, her power lay not in lightning bolts or ocean waves, but in thought precise, deliberate, cool as mountain wind. This made her both respected and feared. The other gods knew that Athena's silence could cut deeper than Apollo's arrows, that her strategies could turn tides of battle without a single sword drawn. She didn't simply enter a room, she unbalanced it, like a scale tipped slightly, forcing everyone to rethink their stance. And her armor, oh, her armor was not just metal. Yes, she wore a shining bronze breastplate, and her helm was forged in the fires of Hephaestus's sacred forge. But that was not her true defense. Her true strength was intellect. She could outthink even Hermes. She could look into a man's eyes and see not his lies, but the reasons behind them. In war, this made her a terrifying opponent. Unlike Ares, who delighted in blood and the chaos of battle, Athena stepped into the fray with a plan. She embodied tactical warfare, the movement of troops, the building of defenses, the calculation of risk. She admired courage, but not recklessness. Her soldiers were thinkers. Her generals were philosophers. That's why the Athenians, who would later become her most devoted followers, didn't just see her as a goddess of war. They saw her as the guardian of cities, the architect of strategy, the mother of civilization, and her influence reached beyond the battlefield. She inspired the building of walls and laws, the structuring of government, the use of reason over rage. While other deities granted passion or fortune, Athena gave humanity the tools to endure, not just physically, but mentally, socially, spiritually. This was her true war, not against men, but against ignorance. Now imagine her walking through the mortal realm for the first time, her feet stirring the dust of the earth, not among the forests of Artemis or the rivers of Demeter, but through the heart of rising cities where mortals struggled with questions of law, honor, and truth. She did not offer miracles. She offered ideas. a new way of building homes, a better method for forging tools, the invention of the bridle to tame horses. Even the flute, they say, was her creation, a gift of music shaped by thoughtful breath. And yet, despite all this, despite her unmatched wisdom, her clarity, her power, she was not always loved, because wisdom, like a mirror, does not flatter. Athena held up that mirror to gods and mortals alike, and not all could bear what they saw. She was accused of being too distant, too cold, too calculating. But she was none of those things. She simply understood a deeper truth, that true justice requires restraint, that strength is nothing without purpose, and that compassion must sometimes take the form of silence. Let us turn now to her relationship with Ares, the god of war. They were siblings, in a sense, both children of Zeus, and yet they could not have been more different. Ares thrived on destruction, his battles fueled by bloodlust and pride. But Athena, she went to war reluctantly, and only when reason had failed. Where Ares raged, she calculated. Where he charged, she waited. And the gods noticed. When cities prayed for protection, they called on Athena. When soldiers whispered in fear before battle, they offered olive branches to her, not Ares. Because deep down, even in the darkest corners of the human heart, people crave not chaos, but clarity. And she offered that, always, but the armor of intellect came at a cost. Athena was a paradox, worshipped, yet distant, admired, yet alone. She had no consort, no court of lovers, no romantic epics carved into stone walls. Her love was given not to individuals, but to ideals. She loved justice. She loved balance. She loved civilization itself. And that, too, made her divine. Her solitude was not loneliness, it was purpose. She walked the path few could follow. And because of that, she became a compass for those who dared to live thoughtfully in a world ruled by impulse. Even among gods, that is rare. Even among mortals, it is sacred. And so she became a protector, not just of cities and warriors, but of thinkers, of poets, of leaders who asked why before they acted. She wrapped them in her armor, invisible but unbreakable, and over time, that armor became a symbol not of war, but of awareness. The helmet, a reminder to keep your mind sharp. The shield, a guard against ignorance. The spear, a tool not to wound, but to point the way forward. Athena wore her armor always, not because she feared battle, but because she understood the burden of thought. Because she knew that thinking deeply, acting wisely, and standing alone when necessary is itself a kind of war. A quiet one, but one that shapes the world. In the next section, we will descend into the mortal realm and witness Athena's greatest gift, not a weapon, but a tree, and the birth of a city that would carry her name for eternity. There are cities that rise from conquest, others from trade, from accident, from necessity. But Athens, that luminous jewel of the ancient world, was not born of war or want. It was born of a gift, and not just any gift, but one given by a goddess. Quiet, green, and enduring. A tree. To tell this story, we must travel to a time when the earth was still young, when the gods walked openly among mortals, and when the land of Attica was a fertile stretch of hills and coast, awaiting a guardian. There, nestled between the mountains and the sea, was a small but growing settlement. The people were industrious, fishermen, herders, early farmers. They had no patron yet, no divine protector to call their own, but their hearts were eager, and the land was rich with promise. The gods, ever watchful, took notice. 2 Olympians laid claim to this newborn city. One was Poseidon, lord of the sea, storm-bringer, earth-shaker. His power was vast, his temper known to all. The other was Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategy, guardian of cities, calm and unyielding. Both stepped onto the soil of Attica, each seeking to become the protector of this new people. The dispute was taken to the other gods, and it was agreed a contest would decide who would claim the city. Each would offer a gift to the mortals. The people themselves, through their king, Cecrops, a half-man, half-serpent figure of myth, would choose which gift they valued most. So the gods gathered on a rocky hill, one that would one day be called the Acropolis. The sun hung high. The air was heavy with anticipation. Poseidon, proud and thunderous, stepped forward first. He raised his mighty trident and struck the ground. From the crack in the rock, a great fountain erupted, spraying salt water high into the sky. It gushed and shimmered, catching the light like liquid crystal. The people gasped. Here, he said, was his gift, a symbol of his domain, water, trade, strength. But when the people tasted it, their joy turned to confusion. It was salt water. A beautiful marvel, yes, but of little use to drink or farm. Poseidon's face darkened. He had shown his might, but not his understanding. Then came Athena. She did not raise her arms. She did not summon lightning. Instead, she knelt. With graceful hands, she pressed her fingers into the soil, and from that humble act, from earth, not sky, there grew a slender, twisting trunk, a tree, an olive tree. Its leaves shimmered a soft silver green. Its branches were supple and strong, and as the wind passed through its boughs, it made a sound not of thunder, but of whispers, as though it carried wisdom in every rustle. The people approached. They tasted its fruit, rich and nourishing. They pressed it into oil to cook, to light their lamps, to heal. They marveled at its wood, perfect for building homes, tools, ships. Poseidon's gift had been a spectacle. Athena's was sustenance. Practical, lasting, thoughtful, and so they chose her. With a voice united, the people of Attica declared Athena their patron. From that moment on, the city would bear her name, Athens, and the olive tree, it remained. They say the very tree she planted still stands on the Acropolis, beside the ruins of the Arachne, its roots clinging to sacred rock, its leaves trembling in the wind. A living link to the divine. But the story does not end there. Poseidon, humiliated, lashed out. Storm clouds gathered. The seas roared. He flooded parts of Attica in anger. Yet Athena did not retaliate with force. She calmed the people. She rebuilt. She taught them to channel the waters into irrigation. She transformed damage into design. This was her way, never to fight destruction with destruction, but to overcome it with structure. And so, under her protection, Athens grew, not just in size, but in soul. It became the cradle of reason, of democracy, of philosophy, the home of Socrates, of Plato, of Pericles. Its people learned to think, to question, to seek balance, all under the watchful eye of their patron goddess. They honored her not with blood, but with ideas. Each year, the city celebrated the Panathenaic festival, a sacred procession to her temple, the Parthenon, where citizens offered olive oil from sacred groves, poetry, hymns, and woven tapestries that told of her wisdom. Her presence shaped their identity. She became not just their protector, but their ideal. In every courtroom, her fairness was remembered. In every debate, her logic echoed, and in every olive grove, the symbol of her first and greatest gift, quiet, patient, fruitful, endured. Let us pause here and reflect. What other god claimed a city not by fire or war, but by planting a tree? What other deity's first act was to kneel, not to conquer, but to offer? This is Athena's legacy, a divine wisdom that does not shout, but grows. That does not demand, but nourishes. Her victory in Athens was not a conquest. It was a conversation between God and mortal, one that still speaks softly through the leaves of every olive tree in Greece. In the next section, we'll travel to the tale of Arachne, a mortal whose pride brought her before Athena in a contest of skill and art, and whose fate reminds us that wisdom must always walk beside humility. In a quiet village near the Lydian plains, a place far from the roaring courts of Olympus or the marble heights of Athens, lived a young woman named Arachne. She was not a queen, not a priestess, just a weaver. Yet in her hands, thread became more than thread, it became life. Her fingers moved like wind over silk, and the tapestries she spun seemed almost to breathe. They captured not just images, but stories, emotions, time itself. People traveled from distant lands to see her work. They whispered that even the nymphs paused in the trees to watch her hands, that the very fates, who spun the destinies of gods and men, tilted their heads in silent admiration. And as always, where talent burns brightly, pride is not far behind. Arachne heard the praise. She drank it in like honeyed wine. And soon, her humility, once soft as lamb's wool, hardened into something sharper. She began to boast that her art was not taught by man, nor muse, nor goddess. That even Athena, the divine weaver, could not match her skill. The whispers reached Olympus. Athena, ever watchful, ever quiet, heard her name spoken on mortal tongues, not with reverence, but with challenge. Now understand, Athena was not petty. She did not punish pride without purpose. But she knew that when mortals forgot their place, it led to ruin, not for the gods, but for themselves. So she descended, not in thunder, not in armor, but in disguise, as an old woman, cloaked and wrinkled, leaning on a gnarled walking stick. She found Arachne seated at her loom, gold thread spilling like sunlight across the frame. The old woman spoke gently, her voice like the rustling of dry leaves. "Child," she said, "your talent is great, but your tongue is reckless. Ask forgiveness. Give thanks to the goddess. Show a little humility before it is taken from you." But Arachne only laughed. "If Athena wishes to prove herself," she said, "let her come. Let her weave. Let her be judged beside me." The disguise melted. In a flash of light and hush of wind, the old woman stood tall and radiant. The armor of Athena shimmered into place. The room stilled. Even the threads on Arachne's loom seemed to pause in fear. But Athena did not smite her. Instead, she accepted the challenge. Two looms, two goddesses of the thread, one mortal, one divine, and a single contest. They sat across from one another, their fingers blurring with motion. No words, only the click and whisper of thread being drawn through warp and weft. Athena, ever noble, wove a tapestry that told the tales of Olympus. It sang of glory, of divine justice, of the greatness of the gods. At its center, the contest for Athens, her gift of the olive tree, her wisdom over Poseidon's wrath. But in each corner, Athena wove cautionary scenes, mortals punished for hubris, for daring to challenge the divine. Her work was perfect, precise, a hymn in color and shape. Arachne wove something else. Her tapestry told the stories no temples sang. She depicted the failings of the gods. Zeus disguised as a swan to seduce Leda, Poseidon chasing Medusa into a temple, Dionysus spreading madness like wine. The gods in Arachne's art were not noble. They were fallible, selfish, cruel. And worse, her skill was flawless. Each detail was alive with truth, each image a mirror. When she finished, even Athena stood silent. Not a single flaw, not a single thread out of place. The mortal had matched the goddess, not just in skill, but in vision. And yet, she had also committed a kind of treason. Athena did not rage. She did not shout. She simply reached out and tore the tapestry in two, not out of envy, but out of sorrow. "You are talented," she said, "but you have forgotten reverence. You have forgotten grace." And then, gently, she reached for Arachne. The girl stood frozen, her pride drained away, her face pale with realization. "I will not destroy you," Athena said softly, "but you shall weave forever." With a whisper, she touched Arachne's forehead, and the girl began to change. Her limbs grew thin, her fingers multiplied, her back curved, and before the goddess stood a spider, delicate and swift, her tiny legs already spinning a silver thread between the cracks of the stone floor. Arachne, the first weaver now eternal. And thus, the spider was born, a creature of silence, of patience, of artistry. And to this day, they say every spider carries a fragment of Arachne's pride and a fragment of Athena's mercy. Now, dear listener, reflect with me. This was not a punishment of wrath, but of transformation. Athena could have ended the girl, but she chose instead to change her, to let her live on, a reminder that wisdom must be paired with humility, or it turns inward and poisons the soul. And this is how Athena governs, not with fury, but with form. Not with revenge, but with meaning. In the next section, we will follow Athena beyond the loom and the olive tree to the shores of Troy and the heart of war, where a clever hero would win her favor and her quiet protection for 10 long years across endless seas. There are many gods of war, but few who choose their champions with such care. Athena, unlike her brother Ares, did not favor brute strength or wild fury. She admired wit, restraint, intellect, the silent weapons of those who could see not only the battlefield, but beyond it. So it was no surprise that among the many warriors who fought in the Trojan War, it was Odysseus, the clever king of Ithaca, who earned her deepest favor. Let us begin at the walls of Troy. The war had raged for 10 long years, a conflict sparked not by politics or power, but by desire. Paris, a prince of Troy, had stolen Helen, the wife of Menelaus. Her beauty launched 1,000 ships, and among them sailed heroes, Achilles, Agamemnon, Ajax, and Odysseus. But unlike the others, Odysseus did not hunger for war. He was a man of home, of hearth, of wife, of child. He had tried to avoid the war altogether, feigning madness by yoking an ox and a donkey to his plow, and sowing salt into his fields. But cleverness cannot hide cleverness, and soon he was drawn into fate's design, and Athena watched. She saw in him a reflection of herself, a mind that turned in quiet spirals, a man who did not trust in might alone, but in strategy. When the Greeks grew weary of siege, it was Odysseus who devised the Trojan horse, a simple trick, but one of such elegance it still echoes through every tale of deception. The Greeks appeared to retreat, leaving behind a massive wooden horse as a gift. The Trojans, drunk on pride and curiosity, pulled it into their city, but inside waited warriors. And thus, by thought, not blade, Troy fell. It was Athena's kind of victory. And for that, she remained close to Odysseus, not openly, not grandly, but as a guide in shadows, a whisper in the wind, a gleam of thought when all seemed lost. Yet Odysseus would soon learn. War ends with fire, but journeys home end in storms. The gods were angry. Poseidon, furious at the fall of Troy, and offended by Odysseus's pride, cursed the hero's return. What should have taken weeks stretched into 10 long years, filled with monsters, tempests, temptations, and grief. And through it all, Athena remained. When his ship was dashed upon the rocks, when the sirens sang sweet lies, when Circe tempted him with magic and comfort, when Calypso offered him immortality in exchange for love. Athena stood beside him, silent, patient, unyielding. Sometimes she appeared in the form of a bird, a shimmering owl perched just above. Other times she came disguised as a sailor, a girl, a stranger at a crossroads. And sometimes she entered his dreams, guiding his thoughts like fingers plucking the strings of a harp. But she never carried him. That was not her way. Athena did not believe in ease. She believed in earned wisdom. She let Odysseus fall, falter, struggle, because from that struggle he would rise wiser. And he did. Each island tested him. Each delay carved away another layer of his pride. And when he finally returned home to Ithaca, disguised, weary, aged, it was Athena who helped him take back his kingdom. Not with an army, but with a plan. She cloaked him in disguise so that he might see who had remained loyal during his absence. She guided his son, Telemachus, helping him grow into strength and wisdom in his father's absence. And when the moment came to face the suitors, the men who had invaded his halls, devoured his wealth, and sought to take his queen, Athena revealed herself, not as a storm, not as a wrathful goddess, but as a calm voice behind the curtain of events. She steadied his hand, she cleared his mind, and the justice that followed was swift but measured. This is Athena's legacy in Odysseus's tale. She did not save him, but she kept him from being lost. She did not lift the sword, but she sharpened the mind. She stood for the kind of heroism that does not shine on shields, but in endurance, in cleverness, in the refusal to surrender to the easy lie. And Odysseus, in turn, honored her not with temples, though he built them, but with remembrance. He spoke her name not just in prayer, but in silence, in thought before action, in strategy before battle, in humility after victory. She was his invisible ally, the mind behind the man. But there is more here than myth. There is something for you, too. Because Athena does not belong only to warriors or kings. She walks beside anyone who chooses thought over impulse, silence over noise, reason over rage. She stands beside the student who studies late into the night, beside the leader who seeks justice, not vengeance, beside the parent who teaches with patience, beside you, perhaps, as you listen now, seeking knowledge in the stillness before sleep. Odysseus was a hero because he survived, yes, but more so because he learned. And that, in the eyes of Athena, is the truest kind of victory. In the next section, we will return to the forge of gods, to the creation of Athena's most fearsome symbol, the aegis, her shield, and will uncover the tale of Medusa, a woman cursed by gods and made eternal in Athena's silent gaze. Not all symbols are born of glory. Some rise from sorrow, from punishment, and from choices made in the murk of divine justice. Tonight, we speak of Medusa, the serpent-haired maiden whose gaze could turn men to stone, and the creation of the aegis, Athena's fearsome shield, edged with divine power and mythic terror. But But to understand the Aegis, we must go back to a time before it existed, back to a temple, a storm, and a violation. Medusa was once a mortal, and she was beautiful, not the kind of beauty meant for poetry, but something more dangerous, more arresting. Her hair was said to glint like woven sunlight. Her eyes, sharp as obsidian, yet soft with curiosity. She served as a priestess in Athena's temple, not for vanity, but for devotion. And here is where the story becomes quiet, uncomfortable, and often forgotten. Because it was in that temple, under the eyes of the goddess, that Poseidon, god of the sea, came to her. Some stories say he loved her. Others say he took her by force. Whatever the truth, and perhaps only the gods know, what followed was not justice. It was transformation. Athena, protector of her temples and her vows, came upon the desecrated altar. And instead of punishing Poseidon, her uncle, a powerful Olympian rival, she turned her gaze to Medusa. Not with hatred, but with ice and silence. She reached out her hand and changed the girl. Golden hair became serpents. Soft eyes turned into mirrors of doom. And her beauty, that dangerous, divine beauty, was made into a weapon. Medusa became the Gorgon, cursed to a life of solitude. Any man who looked into her eyes would be turned to stone, frozen forever in the last moment of fear. It is tempting to rage at Athena here. Why punish the victim? Why not strike down the sea god? But the gods do not move as mortals do. Their justice is old, rooted in balance, not fairness. In the preservation of power, not the nurturing of hearts. And Athena, ever the strategist, may have seen something deeper. She did not destroy Medusa. She changed her, made her untouchable, unapproachable, unbreakable. A kind of cruel mercy, a sanctuary in monstrosity. Years passed. Medusa lived alone, far beyond mortal roads, in the twilight lands at the edge of the world. And then came Perseus, another hero, another pawn, sent by King Polydex to slay the Gorgon and bring back her head, a task meant to kill him. But Perseus was not alone. He had the help of Hermes and Athena. It was she who gifted him the polished shield, gleaming like still water, a tool not of defense, but a vision, a way to face Medusa without truly seeing her, a way to win without cruelty. Perseus entered the Gorgon's lair. The silence was total. Statues littered the cave, warriors caught mid-scream, mid-prayer, forever frozen in stone. And in the heart of that stillness, Medusa slept. Her snakes twitched in dreams. Perseus raised the mirrored shield. Step by step, he moved closer. And then, in a single breath, the blade fell. Her head was severed, and from the blood that spilled, two beings sprang forth: Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, a golden warrior. Even in death, Medusa birthed myth. Perseus placed her head in a sack and began the journey home, bearing the most powerful weapon the gods had ever crafted, a face that could turn kings, beasts, armies to stone. But he would not keep it. He gave it to Athena. And she, goddess of wisdom, of war, of justice, mounted it upon her aegis, a shield forged by Hephaestus, crafted not just of bronze, but of divine resolve. With Medusa's head at its center, the aegis became an object of awe and terror, not for battle, but for presence. It was a reminder to mortals that the gods see all, to the gods that even power has cost, and perhaps to Athena herself, a reflection of a moment in her past when she made a choice, cold, necessary, complicated, and carried its weight forever after. So what is the aegis truly? It is not merely a shield. It is a symbol of the price of power, of the lives transformed in its wake, of a goddess who bore wisdom like a sword, sharp, precise, and sometimes painfully just. And in our world, long removed from temples and titans, that symbol still lingers whenever justice is carried out without empathy. Whenever transformation is born from trauma, whenever strength is both a gift and a burden, there is Athena's aegis. There is Medusa's face, not forgotten, not forgiven, simply remembered. In the next section, we travel from shadows into sunlight, into the very heart of Athens itself, where a goddess and a god once vied for its devotion. Olive tree or crashing wave, peace or power, the fate of a city would hang on one divine contest. Atop the rocky height of the Acropolis, long before temples crowned its summit and philosophers walked its marble paths, two gods stood watching, waiting, and preparing to shape the soul of a city. The land had no name yet, no identity, only promise. It was a place of fertile earth, gentle hills, and open skies, a land of humans who were still finding their voice, still discovering their place in a world ruled by immortals. And the gods, they took notice. Poseidon, lord of the sea, was the first to lay claim. Tall and tempestuous, he strode across the land, trident in hand, his steps shaking the earth. He was a god of deep waters and deeper moods, the kind of god who spoke in waves, not words. Where he went, storms followed. And then came Athena, measured, quiet, holding not a weapon, but an idea. Where Poseidon represented force, Athena embodied vision. But only one god could be chosen to become the patron of this newborn city. And so, a contest was proposed, a divine challenge. Each god would offer a gift to the people of the land, and the gift that proved most valuable, most enduring, would win the people's devotion. The city would bear that god's name and forever live beneath their protection. So, beneath the watching gaze of the early Athenians and the judgment of King Cecrops, a man said to be half human, half serpent, the gods revealed their offerings. Poseidon went first. He raised his mighty trident, struck the rocky earth with a thunderous blow, and from the fissure burst forth a spring. Water surged from the stone, dazzling in the sunlight. The people gasped, a sign of wealth, of abundance. But when they tasted it, it was salt water, sea water, undrinkable. a reminder of Poseidon's domain, powerful, yes, but untamed, unyielding, beautiful but dangerous. Then came Athena. She stepped forward in silence. She knelt upon the same rocky earth, and with a single touch of her fingers, from the dust rose a slender, twisting sapling, an olive tree. At first, the people were underwhelmed. A tree, a humble plant. But Athena spoke gently, like wind moving through leaves. This tree, she said, would give wood for shelter, oil for cooking and light, fruit for nourishment, and peace in times of strife. It would not just be a gift of sustenance. It would be a symbol of civilization, of growth, of wisdom rooted in patience. The people and King Cecrops saw not just the tree, but what it could become. They chose Athena, and so the city was named Athens, and it would thrive not under the roar of waves, but beneath the calm, watchful gaze of a goddess who taught them to think, to build, to reason. Poseidon, in his fury, cursed the land with drought, a final, bitter echo of his pride. But Athena, with time, brought balance. And the olive tree she planted, it stood tall on the Acropolis, long after the contest ended, even through wars and fires, even when the gods themselves faded from mortal memory. The tree, they say, grew back after every destruction, its roots deep in myth and earth alike. The first olive tree, a gift not just of nourishment, but of identity, and more than a symbol, a promise that this city would always belong to thought over impulse, to wisdom over wrath, to Athena. From that moment, the city flourished, not just in walls and markets, but in ideas. Here, democracy was born. Here, Socrates would one day question the very nature of truth. Here, Plato would imagine unseen realms, and Aristotle would gather the bones of logic, all under the protection of the goddess who gave them their name. And even now, when you walk through Athens, when the light glows golden against the white stones, and the wind carries echoes through broken columns, you can feel her presence, not as a statue, but as a whisper. In every book opened, every question asked, every truth spoken softly, but bravely. This is Athena's city, and by choosing a humble tree over a thunderous spring, she taught the world that real power lies not in spectacle, but in endurance. In the next section, we journey deeper into her myths and contradictions, to explore Athena's enigmatic relationship with femininity. Virgin, warrior, protector, and paradox. What does it mean to be a goddess of women, yet so unlike them? Among the Olympians, each god and goddess was known for their domain: love, war, the hunt, the sea. But few possessed an identity as layered, as seemingly contradictory as Athena. She was the goddess of wisdom, war, law, and crafts. She advised kings, inspired philosophers, and defended cities. She was born not from love nor nature, but from Zeus's mind, fully armored, a goddess without a mother, a daughter without a childhood. And she was a virgin, but not in the sense we understand today. Not simply untouched by man, but untouchable, sovereign, alone. Her virginity was a statement, not of chastity, but of independence, in a pantheon of gods driven by desire, jealousy, and tangled unions. Athena stood apart, never swayed by lust, never possessed, never subdued. While goddesses like Aphrodite embodied seduction and Hera ruled over marriage, Athena was entirely her own, yet she was not without contradictions. She was called Parthenos, the Virgin, and from this title rose the great Parthenon, the temple on the Athenian Acropolis. Its pillars still stand as testimony to a civilization's admiration of her wisdom and restraint. And still, she was a goddess of women, of weaving and spinning, of nurturing cities and guiding heroes, of strategy, logic, and creation. She taught the loom to mortals, inspired the growth of olives, and was invoked by women in labor, not as a mother herself, but as a protector. How, then, do we reconcile these threads? How does a goddess, untouched by love, become the guardian of wisdom and womanhood? The answer lies, perhaps, not in modern ideas of virginity, but in the freedom it symbolized in ancient myth. Athena's virginity was not a denial of womanhood. It was a defiance of ownership. She belonged to no one. Not to Zeus, though she was his favorite child. Not to any lover, mortal or divine. Not even to the expectations of her gender. She was woman, and more than woman, shaped by intellect, not desire. Powerful not because of whom she loved, but because of what she knew. And yet, even gods are not free from judgment. There were whispers that Athena was cold, that she favored men, heroes, and kings over women, that she turned her face from softness, from sisterhood, from the warmth found in Aphrodite's gaze or Demeter's arms. Some say she was too close to Zeus, echoing his authority, upholding the order of Olympus without challenging its cruelty. Even the story of Medusa, as we've seen, haunts her. And yet, when women in ancient Greece sought strength, clarity, or guidance in uncertain times, they did not turn to Hera or even Aphrodite. They turned to Athena. She was their shield, their voice, their proof that power could wear a female face, not sensual, not maternal, but wise. And in a society where women were often silenced, kept indoors, or used as political pawns, Athena offered another model. She walked among men as an equal, not by marrying a god, not by seducing a hero, but by earning reverence with her mind. And she showed them, those quiet girls behind stone walls, those women at the loom, that there was more than one way to be divine. But her paradox remained. For though she was called upon by women, she often stood above them, rather than among them. She helped male heroes, Odysseus, Perseus, Heracles. She punished women who challenged her, Arachne, Medusa, even her own half-sister Pallas in some versions. It is as if she stood between two worlds, mortal and divine, masculine and feminine, belonging to both, and yet neither. Perhaps that is her greatest mystery. Athena was a goddess crafted not by love or lineage, but by thought. She is the echo of a civilization wrestling with identity, power, and gender. She is the woman who enters the council of gods not with softness, but with steel, and yet, in her silence, she carries all the unspoken truths of those who could not speak. She is paradox not because she is confused, but because she holds all sides within her. Strength and wisdom, independence and care, justice and judgment, and above all, the power to choose herself. In the next section, we will spin one of the most delicate and devastating threads in her tapestry, the story of Arachne, the mortal weaver who dared to rival a goddess, and what happened when pride, skill, and sorrow entwined on a loom of fate. In the shadowed corners of ancient Lydia, beneath skies brushed with dust and olive smoke, there lived a girl named Arachne. She was not royal, not noble, just the daughter of a humble dyer of wool, but what she possessed was something far rarer. Skill, not merely talent, but a divine, aching mastery. When Arachne sat at her loom, the world paused. Birdsong ceased. Breezes halted. It was said the fibers she wove glowed with secrets. Her threads moved like whispers from the gods themselves. Smooth, perfect, alive. People traveled from distant towns to watch her fingers dance across the loom, as if she weren't weaving cloth, but stories. Entire tapestries sprung from her hands, of stars being born, of rivers curling through mountains, of love found in stormlight. And with time came pride. Perhaps it was youth, or perhaps it was the simple human ache to be seen. But one day, when praised for her brilliance, Arachne smiled and said aloud what others only dared to think. Even Athena could not weave better than I. A silence fell, the kind of silence that lives just before thunder, to challenge a god, especially one as proud and precise as Athena, goddess of wisdom and crafts, was not mere arrogance. It was a summoning. And the goddess answered, not in wrath, not in storms, but in disguise. Athena appeared as an old woman, gray-haired, hunched, eyes flickering with ancient patience. She warned the girl gently, be careful. Give thanks to the gods. No mortal surpasses Athena in the art of weaving. Bow your head, child, before it is too late. But Arachne, proud, defiant, untouched by fear, crossed her arms and met the woman's gaze. If Athena believes she is better than I, then let her come. Let us weave. And the goddess shed her disguise. There, in the flickering hearthlight, Athena revealed herself in her full splendor, tall, gleaming, her robe flowing like polished wisdom, her eyes the color of sharp intellect. A hush swept through the villagers who had gathered to watch. 2 looms were set side by side. The contest began. Athena wove with the discipline of centuries. Her tapestry shimmered with scenes of glory. 12 Olympians, golden and radiant, victorious in all things. At the center, she stitched the mortal fools who had once defied the gods and paid for it. Hubris punished, mortals humbled, order restored. Her work glowed with divine command. And Arachne, she did not tremble. Her hands moved like wind through wheat, and her tapestry told another story, not of triumph, but of truth. She wove the flaws of the gods, their betrayals, their jealousies, their punishments of the innocent. She showed Zeus, disguised and seducing mortal women. She showed Poseidon and the tragedy of Medusa. She showed Apollo, casting curses from scorned love. Her tapestry did not shine. It burned with honesty, with daring, with beauty so flawless it made even Athena pause. The goddess saw it, and for one flickering instant, she knew the girl had won. But gods are not like us. They do not bow to truth. Athena's rage rose, cold and quiet. She did not strike Arachne. She destroyed the tapestry, tearing it to threads. And Arachne, heart-shattered, humiliated before the very villagers who once praised her, did the unthinkable. She ran from the loom and tried to take her own life. But Athena, though furious, was not without depth. She caught the girl in midair. She did not offer comfort. She offered transformation. With a whisper and a breath, she turned Arachne's body small, her arms slender and multiplied, her fingers into legs, and her loom, it remained, only now she would weave it from her own body. Arachne became the first spider, and from that day forward, she would spin in silence, creating patterns more delicate than silk, hidden in corners, hanging from ceilings, always perfect and always unseen. A reminder that brilliance can be punished, that truth can be costly, that gods can be cruel, but also that the spirit of defiance, once born, cannot be erased, only changed. And every time you see a spider's web glinting in the morning light, catch your breath. For in those threads is the echo of a girl who dared to outshine a goddess, and still weaves her truth long after her name has faded. In the next chapter, we shift from personal myth to the arena of war, as Athena guides her favorite among mortals through the smoke and screams of Troy. For wisdom does not always mean peace, and even the goddess of reason has her warriors. The story of Troy begins with a golden apple, not the olive of peace, but the fruit of discord, tossed by the goddess Eris into a wedding feast, inscribed with 3 sharp words, "To the fairest." 3 goddesses reached for it: Hera, queen of the gods; Aphrodite, goddess of love; and Athena, goddess of wisdom and war. The choice of who would claim it was left not to a god, but to a mortal Paris, prince of Troy. One by one, they offered him gifts. Hera promised power. Athena promised glory in battle. Aphrodite promised the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose Aphrodite. And in that choice, he planted the seed of a war that would burn for 10 long years. Athena did not forget. When the Greek ships, 1,000 of them, landed upon the shores of Ilium, Athena was not merely a spectator. She moved through the ranks of warriors like a whisper in their minds, sharpening their resolve, guiding their strategies. Her chosen champion was Odysseus, the wily king of Ithaca, whose mind was as much a weapon as any sword. But she favored others, too, Diomes, who dared to wound the gods themselves, Achilles, fierce and unyielding. Athena's hand was in every turning of the tide. When Diomes faced the war god Ares on the battlefield, it was Athena who stood at his side. She did not send him alone. She guided his spear, driving it into the god's immortal flesh, forcing Ares to retreat to Olympus in humiliation. When the Trojans pressed too hard against the Greek defenses, it was Athena who inspired cunning. And when the moment came to break the walls of Troy, she did not send an army. She sent an idea. The Greeks had grown weary. 10 years of siege had stripped them of hope. Troy's walls stood unbroken, but Athena whispered into the mind of Odysseus a plan unlike any before. A great wooden horse, a gift, they would say, a tribute of surrender. Inside, hidden soldiers, the Trojans, believing their enemies had sailed away, dragged the horse into the heart of their city. And when night fell and the streets lay in drunken celebration, the Greeks emerged. The gates were opened. The city burned. It is tempting to see Athena here as cold, the mind behind a slaughter. But to the Greeks, this was wisdom at its most dangerous, the ability to win without direct force, the victory that comes from knowing your enemy's heart. Yet for all her guidance, Athena's role in Troy did not end with its fall. For in that burning city, another seed was planted, one that would grow into a bitter feud between goddess and mortal. For when Troy fell, a warrior named Ajax the Lesser dragged Cassandra, daughter of Priam and priestess of Athena, from her sacred temple. He violated her upon the very altar of the goddess. The act was not only a crime, it was a desecration. Athena's wrath was immediate, but it would not be sated on the spot. She carried her fury with her, like an ember waiting for the right wind, and she would unleash it not in Troy, but on the sea. When the Greek fleet sailed home, she called upon Poseidon, the very god she once rivaled for Athens, to send storms and ruin upon the returning ships. Many who had survived the spears and swords of Troy perished in those waves. This was Athena's justice, swift, cold, and without mercy. Athena at Troy is a reminder that wisdom is not always gentle, that the olive branch can grow from the same hand that wields the spear, that the goddess of reason can be as relentless in war as she is in peace. For in her eyes, war was not chaos. It was strategy, and victory was always worth the price. In the next section, we turn from battlefields to storms and follow Odysseus, Athena's favored mortal, on his long, perilous journey home. For it is in the winding path of the Odyssey that we see her truest nature as a guardian, guide, and ever-watchful presence. Odysseus, son of Laertes, king of Ithaca. He was no demigod, not like Achilles with his immortal mother, not like Heracles, born of Zeus himself. Odysseus was entirely mortal, but still chosen. From the earliest days of the Trojan War, Athena had seen in him something rare, a mind that bent like a river, never breaking, never still. Not only clever, but wise enough to know when to speak, when to lie, when to wait. And when the city of Troy crumbled, and the war ended in smoke and silence, Odysseus turned his eyes homeward. But the gods were not yet done with him, and neither was Athena. The journey from Troy to Ithaca should have taken mere weeks. Instead, it stretched across 10 long years. Odysseus was cursed by Poseidon, the sea god whose son, the Cyclops Polyphemus, Odysseus had blinded in a daring escape. The god's wrath churned the sea into a labyrinth, and the hero was cast adrift from island to island, monster to monster, temptation to temptation. And yet, through every storm, every threat, Athena watched. She did not always intervene, but she was always near. She guided him past the lotus eaters, whose flowers made men forget home. She steadied his hand in the cave of the Cyclops. She whispered warnings before the cliffs of the Laestrygonians, cannibal giants who swallowed ships whole. And in his darkest hours, when his men were lost, and the sea grew cruel, she came, not as thunder, not as fire, but as a whisper in his mind, as clarity in chaos, as the strength to endure. Yet for years she was held back. The gods had quarreled over his fate. Zeus allowed Poseidon his vengeance, and Odysseus was left to suffer, marooned on the island of Ogygia, prisoner of the nymph Calypso, who loved him. 7 years passed, and Athena, weary of watching, climbed the great heights of Olympus. There, in the company of gods, she pleaded, "He has suffered. Let him return. Let him come home." Her voice, calm, resolute, and unwavering, pierced even Zeus's indifference, and so the wheel turned again. Hermes was sent to command Calypso to release her captive, and Odysseus built his raft, weak in body, but burning with hope. Even then, Poseidon struck, wrecking the raft with storms, but Athena shielded him once more, guiding him to the shores of Phaeacia, where kind strangers clothed him and listened to his tale. When he wept at the memories of Troy, they wept with him, and it was there, among song and firelight, that Athena's true hand was felt once more. She ensured he was gifted a ship, swift and silent, to finally carry him to Ithaca. But home was not what it once was. His halls were filled with suitors, arrogant, wasteful men, courting his faithful wife, Penelope, believing her husband long dead. And his son, Telemachus, now grown, wandered the land searching for a father he had never truly known. Odysseus could not return in glory. He returned in disguise. And again, Athena helped him. She cloaked him as a beggar, guided his son back from distant lands, reunited father and child in a moment so tender, so sacred, that even the gods themselves might have turned their faces away in reverence. Together they plotted, not for vengeance alone, but for justice. And when the time came, Odysseus revealed himself at last. He strung his great bow, a weapon no suitor could bend. He loosed arrows swift and deadly, and the great hall of Ithaca was cleared. Still, blood brings unrest, The families of the dead stirred with anger, and so Athena came one final time. She stepped into the path of vengeance. She stilled swords. She spoke peace, not with thunder, but with wisdom. And the house of Odysseus, after 20 long years, was at peace. In the story of the Odyssey, Athena is more than a goddess. She is a guardian, a mentor, a witness to suffering, and a hand reaching through the darkness. She does not shield her chosen from pain. She gives them the strength to survive it. And in Odysseus, clever, scarred, loyal, she found a reflection of herself. In the next chapter, we will return to the heart of Athens, where the goddess watches her city rise from stone and idea into glory. For it is in the temples and laws of men that her true legacy was carved, not in blood, but in marble and mind. In the beginning, there was only the land, a rocky stretch of hills and valleys, ringed by sea and mountain. It held no name, no glory, only potential, the raw clay of destiny waiting to be shaped. The gods looked upon this place, and 2 among them desired it. Poseidon, lord of the seas, bearer of storms, and Athena, goddess of wisdom and craft, bearer of reason and law. Each wished to become the patron of this future city. And so, a contest was born, one judged not by divine decree, but by the mortal hearts of the people who would one day live there. Poseidon went first. He struck the ground with his great trident, and from the earth sprang a spring of salt water, or, in some versions, a magnificent warhorse. It roared with power. It shimmered with might, a gift of conquest, of reach, of the open sea and all its glory. But the water was briny and undrinkable. The people watched, awed, but uncertain. Then came Athena. She stepped forward in silence, her feet leaving no print, and with a single touch of her spear, she brought forth from the dry soil a tree, an olive tree, modest, quiet, its trunk twisted, its fruit humble. But the people tasted its oil. They saw its wood. They felt its shade, and in that moment they understood. Athena had not given them power. She had given them sustenance, peace, trade, longevity, life. The people bowed, and the land was named Athens. It was not merely a gift that earned her the city, but a vision. Athena became the soul of Athens, not just its namesake, but its muse. As the city grew, rising in tiers of stone and marble, she stood at its heart, not in body, but in spirit. Her values shaped its laws, her reason guided its assemblies, and her ideals, balance, logic, moderation, became the foundation of what we now call democracy. On the tallest hill, the Acropolis, the people built her a home, the Parthenon, a temple unlike any before it. Every stone was measured with mathematical precision. Every column told a story of gods, of battles, of ideals. Inside stood her statue, Athena Parthenos, cloaked in gold and ivory, spear in hand, the serpent of wisdom at her feet, and the goddess of victory, Nike, in her palm. Visitors wept at her beauty. Philosophers knelt in silence. She was not merely worshipped, she was studied. And it was in this age, this golden stretch of time, that Athena's spirit reached its greatest bloom. For the city of Athens became not just a hub of trade or power, but a cradle of thought. Here, Socrates questioned everything and paid with his life. Here, Plato envisioned ideal forms and eternal truths. Here, Aristotle wandered, asking what it meant to live well, to think clearly, to know. And in every argument, in every scroll, in every pause between questions, you can almost hear the whisper of a goddess who stood for logic before men ever spoke its name. But greatness is never eternal. Athens would rise and fall, empires would come, statues would crumble, gods would fade, but the olive tree still stands. Yes, to this day, near the Arachne on the Acropolis, an ancient olive tree grows, said to be the very one gifted by Athena. It is not large, it does not boast, but it endures. Through conquest, through fire, through the slow erosion of time. And perhaps that is the most Athena-like gift of all. She did not give her people invincibility. She gave them thought, and thought survives. It is whispered in lecture halls, written in books, carried in laws, echoed in every corner of the world where reason is still cherished. Athena was never just a goddess of war. She was the architect of cities, of minds, of futures. In the final chapter, we leave behind temples and myths and walk into the twilight of her legend, for even gods in time are forgotten. But what they leave behind can live forever. Then, let us take one last journey through the corridors of time, where myths dissolve into memory, and memory becomes the quiet soil from which civilizations grow. Tonight, we arrive at the end, not of a story, but of a presence. Athena, goddess of wisdom, of war, of cities and craft. What becomes of a deity when belief fades? When temples crack and offerings cease, we follow her now not through battlefields or marble halls, but through the shadows and reflections she has left behind in us. Dove Section 15. The legacy of Athena echoes through time. The ancient world does not fall in a single night. It crumbles slowly, like parchment in the wind, like a statue weathered by centuries of salt and sun. And so it was with the gods of Greece. By the time Rome ruled the world, the old gods were already stories retold. Their names changed, their faces remade. Athena became Minerva, still wise, still armed, still silent in her strength. But even that echo would fade. As new faiths rose, Christianity, Islam, and beyond, the Olympians withdrew, not in fury, but in silence. Their temples became ruins, their names subjects for scholars, their statues trophies for collectors and museums. But Athena was never a goddess of flame. She did not demand blood or thunder. She was an idea, and ideas, unlike idols, do not die. Her spirit flowed into unexpected places. In the cathedrals of Europe, as monks copied texts by candlelight, Athena's flame flickered in the form of philosophy, of inquiry, of logic. In the Renaissance, when artists and thinkers turned once more to ancient beauty, she stepped quietly back into the light. Botticelli painted her. Dante invoked her wisdom. Michelangelo whispered her name in marble. In America, the founding fathers looked to Athens, to her democracy, her balance of power, her elevation of reason. And Athena's ideals were woven into their vision. Even today, her face is on currency, her name in schools, libraries, cities. Her olive branch is the symbol of peace, her owl still the icon of wisdom. She is everywhere, if you know where to look. But more than symbols or art, Athena endures in something far subtler, in the way we wrestle with what is right, not just what is strong, in how we teach and learn and ask questions. In every courtroom, every classroom, every careful step toward justice or understanding. That is her domain. She does not command worship. She whispers in thought. When a child first understands the stars, when a leader chooses peace over pride, when a craftsman shapes something not for war, but for beauty, Athena is there. And yet, even gods grow quiet. There is a sadness in that truth, but also serenity. She has become part of us now, not above us. Where once we built temples of stone, we now build temples of thought. Where once we lifted prayers, we now lift questions. And that, perhaps, is her final gift. Not certainty, but the courage to wonder. As the moon drifts across the Aegean sky, and the olive leaves rustle in the night wind, you may hear her still, not as thunder, not as vision, but as a presence in your own thoughts, a quiet guide, a flicker of insight. Athena does not demand to be seen. She waits to be remembered. Thank you for walking with me through this history. May your dreams tonight be guided by wisdom, and your mornings filled with quiet strength. If this journey moved you, consider subscribing, leaving a gentle like, or sharing it with a fellow night thinker. Now, before you close your eyes, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it there? I'd love to know which corners of the world this story has reached. From my voice to your dreams, good night, Sherry Crescent Moon.